This drawing, of all the pieces I've ever made, speaks to me the most about time. When I looked at it after finishing the final little details, I saw the shape as reminiscent of an hourglass or a figure-8 infinity loop. Only instead of something that measures the amount of time passed, I see it more as something representative of the infinite expansion in the eternal now moment. In this world, especially in the Western world, from the time we are born, time is counted, right? Like the doctors will note down time of birth, and at the end of our life, the coroner will note down the time of death. We see birth as the beginning, death as the ending, and the in between is the only thing we really consider to be ours. That is our lifetime. But when we see time as finite and as a resource that we will use up if we waste it, we think of wasting time, spending time, squandering our time, or making the most of our time, or spending time, depending on how we look at it. If we see it that way, for me anyway, and probably for others who think the way I think, it makes life feel really dreadful. Like the best is behind us. The best health and wellness and sex appeal and beauty happens in our youth, and we are marching towards an inevitable decline. A decline in our physical appearance, a decline in our mental capacity, a decline in just the amount of time that we have left to do what we want to do. It can feel overwhelming and impending and also kind of unfair. But when we look at time through more of an Eastern lens, we don't have the same pressure that we get in the West where we're told YOLO, like you only live once. Instead, we see this one lifetime that we are in now as a dream within the infinite awareness of our higher self, of the spirit, of the soul. And when we see time not as something that we are running out of, but as something that we exist as a point within, we feel more capable of doing anything and everything. We're not marching towards an inevitable decline and an ending. Instead, we are dancing and spiraling within what we have available that is always available, always has been, and always will be. There's a spiral at the top and a flowering form at the bottom of this page. You know what? This was supposed to be a short, but I'm starting to realize I'm a talker. I am never going to fit everything that I have to say within the format of a short video. So I'm going to make this a long form one and just go ahead and explain right now that on the screen for a long form video, the top, when I say the top, I mean the left-hand side. And when I say the bottom, I mean the right-hand side. So yeah, on the top or the left, we see kind of a spiraling form of details, the bottom of which merges into a point that becomes the center of a flowering shape. And it's interesting. I'm so sorry to forget who made this comment recently. It might have been Brian, I think, who pointed out that he sees fractals in my art. And when I read that comment, I replied back saying, oh, that's interesting. Where do you see the fractals? Because I didn't quite understand what fractals were, which is kind of funny because I even had a deck of oracle cards once called Path of the Soul Destiny cards, created by a Vancouver Island artist who was kind of a pioneer in the field of computer-generated art. She made stunningly beautiful fractal patterns. And I'm also a huge fan of crop circles. This is something I think I've talked about in at least 5 of my videos over the years, and you can expect to hear more about them in the future. But anyway, yeah, I wasn't sure what he meant when he said that he saw fractals in my art until I did a Google search because I was so captivated by the concept that I wanted to understand it. So I did a search for fractals in art to see if there were other artists who did this and examples so I could understand better what it means. Maybe I'll try. I'm not a good video editor, so if you don't see a Jackson Pollock painting on your screen right now, like, feel free to pause this video and go look at one after I describe it, or just Google this yourself because it is quite fascinating. So what came up in my search results were that scientists and art historians are uniting to examine the fractals that appear in the art of Jackson Pollock. Now, I've always loved Pollock's art. I am an abstract expressionist at heart. I love Les Automatistes, the Québécois, Montreal-based art movement that was comprised of artists who wrote something called Le Refus Global. It was basically like a mission statement or like a manifesto in which they declared to the art world that they will never use the skills they have, the paint, the materials available to them, to merely depict what already exists or to draw a picture of something that could be described verbally or captured through photograph. That instead their art would be channeled in an automatic painting, automatic drawing kind of way. That's my art love language right there. I love Mark Rothko with his color field works that are meant to be entered, not merely looked at. I really love, Mondrian with his color blocks, and my favorites of all time are Kandinsky, who's seen as like the father of abstract expressionism, and an unsung hero who was his contemporary, although her work didn't actually get seen until decades and decades later, Hilma af Klint, who started as a portrait painter until one night she attended a seance and felt that a spirit had entered her life and followed her home and started giving her dictation for what she should paint and what it means. Her body of work is fascinating. Oh my goodness, I know I'm going off on a major tangent here, but if you're interested in art, it's worth noting down these names and Googling them to see, or go to a bookstore and look in an art book to see what kind of art they made. But anyway, yeah, I adore abstract art. And I would almost feel personally offended on behalf of the artist whenever I hear people look at something like Mark Rothko's color field work and say anybody could paint that. An unskilled laborer who paints house walls, on his first day could just take a brush and paint a field of color like that. It's offensive because if you look at one of Mark Rothko's paintings in person, which I've been blessed enough to do at the Tate Modern when I was in London, it's not just a flat, solid field of color. He's layered colors on colors. He'll do like a very deep, dark purple base and then paint layers of black on top of that in a way that it's not just black, it's like black, but you can see into the purple. There's something to it. There's color theory when he divides a canvas in two and does one color with a line in the middle and then another color below. And if you allow yourself to feel what the colors make you feel, then you enter into the space that Rothko intended. It's not supposed to be about meticulous artistic precision and brushstroke perfection or representational imagery capturing something in the visual plane. It's meant to evoke emotion through color. Like, that was his thing. And I feel like each abstract artist, each non-representational abstract artist has a different thing, a different sentiment or emotion that they intend for you to experience in contemplation and observation of their art. Now, why I'm giving this big long preamble to it is that for me personally, the sentiment or the experience I'm aiming to convey through my drawings and through my paintings is the meditative state I go into, the flow state I go into while I draw and paint. Like, if you look at one of my drawings, I will feel fulfilled as an artist if you look at every little detail. If instead of just seeing it for the whole, you allow yourself to look at the minutiae. Each pen stroke, each little tiny swirl, each flowering form within it is like a drawing in and of itself. It's not one drawing, it's a collection of tiny little drawings. It's maximalism on an infinitesimal, mini tiny detail scale. So anyway, that comment that there are fractals in my art, that compelled me to Google fractal art. And back to my point here before my little meander through abstract art history, my point being, scientists have discovered that Jackson Pollock was incredibly talented and skilled. That his drip paintings, even though they tend to be the paintings, the laity, the lay people, those who are not part of the religion of art, because to me, art is like my religion. The laity who look at it will often say, my 5-year-old could do that. Like, oh, I spilled my coffee and it looks just like that, or whatever. Like, anybody can take a paintbrush and splat it onto a canvas and have it look like that. But what they're discovering is that there's even a computer program that's similar to, I guess it would be the same as AI. It filters through data to determine whether a Jackson Pollock painting is an original or a forgery, because obviously they're very, very valuable. So forgers try to forge, right? They can differentiate between a forgery and an original because the forgeries are not able to capture the same universal, natural fractals that Pollock achieved. And in some ways, he was a mad genius. Well, in many ways, he was an artistic genius because they found, okay, so what it means, the purpose of my search, what does it mean for there to be a fractal in an art piece? What that means is if you look at the whole composition, the entire large-scale canvas in the sake of a Pollock, or the large or small piece of paper, as it were, with my own art, there's a certain level of busyness in the composition. But when you zoom in and crop it in one section of the piece, and then blow that up to the same scale as the original, it looks just as busy. The same patterns are replicated on the small scale that you see on the large scale of the work. And it's interesting that this was the first drawing that I made after reading that comment, because of all my drawings, this is the one that I see those fractals in the most clearly. So for example, on the screen, you see on the right side of the drawing, or the right side of the screen, in the very center of a circle, there's a form that looks like petals are coming out of it, with circles extending out of those petals. And then surrounding that, there's a circle with petals coming off of it, made of small little drawn details. Well, if you zoom in to the details on any of those petals, you will find more details. It will continue to look detailed. And that same symbol is repeated throughout the whole of the drawing on smaller scales. Same way with the spiral on the left-hand side of the drawing, or what would be the top if it were to be flipped vertically. And so that's there in Pollock's paintings too. Like, they look busy and chaotic when you see them as a whole, and yet when you zoom into a part of them, They have the same level of busyness and chaos, just with smaller drips and smaller splashes of paint. So fractals are nature's art form of expression. If you look at trees, especially in the winter when they've lost their leaves, from a distance, you'll see a busy, chaotic pattern of branches, intermingling branches, branching off the main structure of the tree. When you zoom in on any branch, each branch looks itself like the tree as a whole. Each branch has twigs that come off of it, the same way the main branches come off the trunk of the tree. And then when you zoom into those, they will also have tiny little pieces coming off of them that the leaves grow out of. Pardon me, I'm not really a horticulturalist, so I don't know the names of the little twigs the leaves grow out of, but I think you know what I'm describing here. So yeah, fractals are there in nature. We see them in plants, we see them in clouds, we see them in, the zoomed in crystalline structure of bone growth. They are everywhere. And it's really cool to find them in art, especially unintentionally, as in the case of my drawing. And they're saying that Jackson Pollock, he had like a natural instinct to create it, or an intuition, because at the time of his painting, fractal geometry wasn't even really being discussed yet. So I find it really fascinating, and it's also the kind of form we'll see repeated over and over again in crop circles and in ancient architecture, temple architecture in India. And I just love it. Mosaic tile patterns, I'm sure, will also contain it because it's popping into my mind in the Arabic world. But anyway, I just adore contemplating on the shapes and the patterns that come through in art. But like I said, when I finished this drawing, the first thing that I noticed was that it was almost like a figure 8 infinity loop hourglass. And yet, it's the exact opposite of that. It's the exact opposite of quantifying and counting time as a limited resource that has run out or passed or that ever could run out. And instead, it looks more at what astrophysicists and the quantum physics. Quantum physicists will describe as the eternal now, and what Eastern religious practitioners have referred to from time immemorial in the Vedic culture, in like the ancient pre-Hindu Sanatana Dharma, where they will describe time as ever present, ever existing, eternally now. We are experiencing its passage from within it because we are in this 3D earth matrix of life where we experience finiteness. But from the greater scheme perspective, everything exists simultaneously. All moments are contained within this one moment. And to me, that makes time itself a fractal. Our lifetime is the small-scale detail within the greater fractal of this world, which is a small little point within the greater fractal of the spiral galaxy that we're in, which is a fractal of the universe, which could be a fractal of the multiverse. Everything is in constant expansion. As long as we are alive, we are learning. And therefore, we are gaining more experiences, more perspectives, more understandings. Even if someone is declining in their advanced age and slipping into dementia, even still, they are accumulating new experiences. And in that regard, their spiritual self, their higher self, is still expanding, still learning. Even at the moment of death, when the physical body ends, that spirit goes back into a greater whole, enriched by the experiences from this particular university course of a life lesson. And I see that in this drawing. I think that's what makes this one my favorite. I'm calling it the hourglass or the hourless glass of Kairos. So in ancient times, Kairos was considered like the lord of infinite time or the principle of divine timing, whereas Chronos is the chronological time personified. We in our society are driven by Chronos. When you look at magazine covers talking about advances in any industry, whether it's artists or fashion designers or scientists or doctors, we'll often see like the top 30 under 30 or the best 20 under 20. And it's praising these youthful people for achieving great things by a certain cutoff point. And I feel like that sets us up to feel like failures if we haven't achieved a certain thing by a certain time. How many of us have grown up thinking, I will be famous by this age, or with art, I'll have my first solo exhibit or a book of my art published by this age or that age. Or for other people, I want to finish university by this point, get married by that point, have kids by that point, and be successful in my career by age whatever, so I can retire by 60. We see time chronologically because we live in a society brainwashed to believe that that is the only format in which time can exist, that we have a limited resource. In India, I never heard anybody say YOLO. And that was the era in which people in the West were constantly saying YOLO, you only live once. That was around the era The Bucket List was a big popular movie. I think the term was even coined at that point, right? Didn't the movie coin that term? The writers of the movie? The bucket list, all the things you want to do before you die, so you better hurry up and do them. That's something you don't really hear in India either, in the Hindu parts, the Buddhist parts, anyway, because they don't believe you only live once. They believe this is one lifetime and that you will have many, many, many lifetimes until you as a soul have exhausted all your karma, which is essentially like you've checked off all the items from your spirit bucket list. But the good thing about the spirit bucket list is that you don't have to finish it in one lifetime. You've got other lifetimes. If you never get to travel to Japan this time around, don't worry. Either you've been there in a past life or you'll be there in a future life. If you don't achieve a great scientific discovery and you really, really wanted to, you will come back, and in your next lifetime, maybe you will be considered like a Stephen Hawking or an Albert Einstein or a Nikola Tesla or whatever it is you aspire to. When we see time through the eyes only of chronology, we can feel really down about ourselves. It's almost like having a doomsday cult as our societal default. We often hear people say, like, the only thing guaranteed in life is death. And while that might be true as a fact, it's not exactly true in the greater scheme where prior to that moment, we can touch base with our spirit self and realize our own infinity. That's enlightenment there in a nutshell. When even while alive, we go beyond the fear of death because we understand we have lived before. And if we choose to, we will live again. Or if we choose to, we will travel the cosmos and visit other places, other planets, other star systems, other planes of reality. When we think of ourselves as only this three-dimensional self, we can't possibly imagine what it would feel like to be a 4D spirit, a 5D guide, a higher dimensional thing for which we don't even have a word in our language and beyond, because we are locked in the prison of self-imposed limitation, where we agree to believe that this is all there is, that if you put an hourglass on the table and flip it, all the sand on the top represents the amount of time that we have to measure. And as it funnels through that little central waist and then down into the bottom bulb to collect, that represents all the time gone that we will never get back again. If we see our lives as measured by a giant hourglass, it's easy to feel like we are running out of time, like it's a limited resource for us. And we hear expressions in the business world like time is money, don't waste time. But for me, that highly productivity driven, finance driven, earning driven, achievement driven concept of life's value really takes all the higher joy out of life. One of my favorite things to do is sit on my balcony at night and look up at the sky. If there are clouds, watch the clouds change shape. If not, watch the stars come out, watch the satellites, watch the UFOs and differentiate which one's which based on how they move, how they shine, how they appear, how erratic or consistent their trajectory might happen to be. I love doing that. Some people might call it a waste of time. You're just sitting and staring. You're doing nothing. And yet in that nothing, we find the key to everything, because those are the moments where new ideas come to us, new revelations, new understandings. A lot of times in the moments when I am wasting time, quote unquote, wasting time, just sitting around, listening to music, going for a long walk, those are the moments when the ideas for YouTube videos come to me. Those are the moments when the meanings of my art will come to me. If I'm thinking of a specific drawing and, wow, what do you think that represents? Asking myself, what does that represent to me? How would I describe this? What do I see in it? That's where the ideas unravel, unfurl in the best possible way. Not unravel as in get messy, but unravel as in expand. And that expansion, that's the meaning that I see in this particular drawing. The spiral point on the left-hand side of the screen, which is like the top of the image, that could grow forever and ever. It could expand outwards. Imagine instead of this being drawn on a piece of watercolor paper, if this had been drawn on a piece of dough, you could roll that dough with a rolling pin and make it thinner and stretch it further, and then suddenly you have more space to draw more details. And on the right-hand side, where these flower petals seem to be growing out of a central circle, getting ever bigger as they move from the point that looks almost like it would be the waist of an hourglass, the narrow middle, as it moves out towards the edge, it could keep going infinitely. And then where I see this fractalizing is on the farthest right, the far right upper corner of the screen, which is the bottom right corner of the painting. Somehow I managed to draw that same flowering image, but in reverse. And instead of making each petal filled with different details, they're kind of shaded black on one side with little lines on the other side. I wasn't even intentionally trying to replicate that flower shape. It just comes through. This is what I love about automatic drawing, about drawing something abstract without premeditation, without pre-planning the composition. It just comes out how it's meant to be. And then these ideas can flourish in our minds when we contemplate it. Anyway, the hourless glass of Kairos is all about seeing time as an eternal now. The moments are not measured by something funneling into something else where it's going to accumulate and build up and represent how much has been spent, used, wasted, lost, gone. Instead, each side, the past and the future, with the present being the central moment, it's simultaneously existent. And if you have the expanded infinite presence of an unembodied soul, where you're looking at earth, you're looking at human lives, and you are in that eternal now where you remember the series of your past lives. And you can also remember your future lives because you are beyond being stuck in linear perspective. And you can see reality for the past and the future from the moment of presence. When you can see that, there's no fear of death. There's no celebration of birth as your beginning, because the beginning point, the birth point, is just when the dream of another life is entered into by the sleeping soul. If you remember your dreams, and I usually do, and if you don't, I highly, highly recommend experimenting to get yourself to the point where you can. For example, anytime you wake up and you remember a dream, while it's still fresh in your mind, write down everything about it that you remember. I do this, and one thing that's been tripping me out lately is that even when I remember my dreams, I don't remember the moment of moving from wakefulness into sleep. That's one of the coolest states. In Sanskrit, they have words to describe states of consciousness. And there's a specific word that eludes me right now. I forget it at the moment, so pardon me. But one of the states of awareness is the state between wakefulness and dream. And that's the state in which we can consciously enter a lucid dream, the state in which your waking mind is still alert and aware. So when dream voices start to speak, at first it can be a little bit jarring and frightening because it feels like you're laying there in your bed by yourself and suddenly somebody's talking to you. Those are the moments when you'll either wake yourself up and realize you were about to sleep, or enter into it and explore the dream. In my 41 years of life, I've only had a handful of times that I can count where I consciously entered into a dream and can articulate and remember the dream's beginning point. And I think that's similar to birth, right? There are very few people who remember lucidly the moment of their own birth. It's kind of like wherever their first memory happens to be in their life, when they remember back to that, it's like they've always been alive. And I think this is why people fear death, because birth is the moment, the beginning. If you don't remember it, though, it's almost like you've tricked yourself into feeling like you've always been you. You've always had that body, that name, that family, that identity, that nationality, those likes and dislikes, that mind through which you're thinking. If you do remember the moment of your birth, you know that you existed before birth. And so this is something I hardly ever talk about because people can be quite skeptical, quite dismissive, and quite rude about things they don't understand. But I do remember being born. My very first memory is my birth in this lifetime. What I remember is suddenly coming out of a space that felt extremely comfortable and dark, and into a space where the light hurt my eyes. It was so bright. And although I didn't yet have the English language to formulate the words, in a nonverbal way, I had the vivid awareness, the presence to think, this is so different from how it's been before. And by this, I mean reality around me. I looked up at the ceiling and saw the bright fluorescent hospital lights. And I was contained in a room that was a sterile environment. I'm assuming in my past lives, it was so long ago that that didn't exist because I was looking at all of those things, captivated and curious about why humanity went in the direction of creating them, of making it like this. And then I remember as I was looking around and around, my focus narrowed onto my grandma who was holding me. She was in the delivery room. She herself is trained as an operating room nurse. She's had 7 babies of her own, and she was there with my mom. And the doctor handed me to my grandma. So, yeah, I remember at first looking around, marveling at the way things appeared that I had never seen before, and then seeing my grandma's face. And she was smiling, and I felt her love, so I smiled back at her. And this is something that she has told me and told other relatives of ours as being like really different, because she said that when the doctor handed me to her, first of all, I didn't cry when I was born. She said she had never before seen a newborn baby looking around and actually stopping to look at specific things, because typically we're told babies' eyes don't see yet when they're born. They have to learn to focus. And when I looked right at her, when we made that eye contact and smiled at each other, and I wasn't gassy, I wasn't pooping, that was a smile she had never before seen on an infant face. For me, this is kind of like proof of the age of the soul, that I am an old soul, that I've lived before. And I feel like it could also be an indication of the third eye. If we've achieved a certain yogic awareness in a previous lifetime, if we've spent lifetimes meditating, reaching for enlightenment, gaining awareness of the eternal now within the finiteness of time, when we are born, we're not born as a new little baby filled with fear and trepidation and pain and anxiety about the new lifetime into which we are embarking. Instead, it's like consciously falling asleep and being aware of the fact that we're dreaming. The way sleepers can either have nightmares or ordinary dreams or curious dreams or lucid dreams, lucid being the dreams in which we are aware of the fact that we are dreaming. And so scary things don't scare us because we know that they are figments of our dreamtime imagination. And wonderful things are able to be noted down. Maybe they amaze us, but not in a way they would if they were in the physical world, because we are aware that we're dreaming. And spiritual concepts that are noteworthy, we can make mental notes to remember them. The same way that we can have unconscious dreams or lucid dreams, we can have an unconscious lifetime, which is the soul's dream, or a conscious one. And in India, one of my favorite lessons about consciousness was the lesson that every single pre-linguistic baby is in the state yogis and meditators aspire to reach, which is the state of silencing the mind, silencing the inner chatter, the dialogue, the stream of verbal words that seems somewhat incessant. Getting to that space of inner silence is how some define enlightenment. Now, that is something that when I first heard of it in my early 20s, it made me cry, because I had these vivid memories of being a baby on the brown shag carpet floor of my mom's first house and wiggling my fingers into the carpet and exploring the texture and the sensation, how it felt under my fingertips, and playing with perspective, looking at the carpet when I'm sitting up or in my high chair or in the jolly jumper, how it looks like a solid brown plane. And yet when I'm lying on my tummy with my nose to the carpet fiber, with my fingers digging into it, each strand of yarn becomes visible. The carpet isn't just one mass of brown. It's now a collection of twisted fibers, each one being like a little a little curly cue. You can do this in the grass outside too. Like, look at the grass from a distance and it's just a field of green. But get down into it, and each blade is a life. Each blade is a little life. And then between the blades, there might be ants, insects, other little critters. It's teeming with life in it that we don't even realize if we're just standing up and walking across it. That is the same way I see existence and infinity from a time perspective. Matter. We see our reality as time and space, right? Time being the measurement of how long we get to be here, how much we remember, how much forward we get to go, and space meaning where we are, the area that we occupy, our house, our home, the places we've been, the places we've traveled, the physical matter in which we exist. But when we expand beyond all of that and contemplate on the fact that our presence is not just localized within our bodies, it's not that we are a soul that has entered into a body, it's that we are a body tuned into the higher soul. Your soul has a body, not that your body has a soul. When you expand your consciousness and contemplate what they refer to as the higher self, I don't think of it as the higher self. I think of it as the expanded self, because it goes up, down, and all around until it encompasses infinity. I feel like the Vedic scriptures described this the best when they described Lord Shiva as the infinite shaft of light. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this story, so I'm going to tell it because I love Lord Shiva. I actually have a Nataraja deity in front of my window, the same deity they have in front of CERN above the Super Collider, where you see the figure dancing with a leg elevated and the hand pointing down to it in a circle of fire that represents the constant expanding cosmic dance of existence. When you contemplate space from the perspective of Shiva, there is infinity and ever expansion. So in Hinduism, there is a tri-deity, a trinity. Instead of it being a father, a son, and a ghost, like you see in Christianity, the Hindu trinity is a trinity of couples. There is Brahma and Saraswati, the god and goddess of creation. There's Vishnu and Lakshmi, the god and goddess of maintenance. And there's Shiva and Shakti, the god and goddess of, some will say destruction, and others will say rejuvenation. I like to think destruction and rejuvenation are both the same thing. When organic matter decomposes, it becomes the fertilizer from which new matter grows, right? So destruction is rejuvenation. A controlled burn exists to keep nature blooming, not just to destroy it, but to make sure it perpetuates itself and that it won't be accidentally destroyed. Anyway, there's a story, and I see this as allegory, not as a thing that happened, not like an actual reported event, but more like a whatever, not just myth, but a personified description of what reality is, where Brahma, the male creator, Vishnu, the maintainer of existence, and Shiva, the rejuvenator, were all together. And Brahma and Vishnu were debating which one is greater. Brahma's argument being, I made this what it is. I made this world, I made these people, I made these bodies. Without me, nothing would exist because I created it. And yet Vishnu said, well, you created it, but without me, it wouldn't continue to exist because I maintain creation. But through my existence, everything that you created continues to flourish, continues to be. So I'm bigger, I'm greater. So the two of them were having this debate, who is superior? And then Lord Shiva didn't even have to debate. Through his presence, he made it clear that he is greater than the both of them combined. And so Brahma, the creator, decided to go find the beginning of Shiva. Essentially, he's trying to prove, well, I created everything, so I must have created Shiva. So he dives down, trying to find Shiva's feet. But as he dives down, Shiva's feet start tunneling down further and further and further, faster than Brahma can fall down to find them. And so it becomes pointless, like an impossible mission. Brahma can't find the feet of Shiva because the closer he thinks he gets to them, the farther away they become. Kind of like going towards a mirage in the desert. As soon as you think you've reached that water, there's just more sand and the water appears to be further and further away. That's like what Shiva's feet were to Brahma, who eventually gave up and went back and said, you know what, Shiva's greater. Vishnu, the maintainer, starts traveling upwards. He goes to seek the head of Lord Shiva. He wants to find the end point, the top, the peak. And so he starts flying upwards. But as he moves upwards, that infinite column of light that is Shiva's expression just starts going further and further and further because Shiva is infinite. You can't find the top or the bottom of a circle. And although that's not the description in the Vedas, they don't say he's a circle. That's what I see when I think of this, that the farther up Vishnu goes, the more he realizes that head is infinitely higher than he can ever be. And as far down as Brahma goes, he realizes those feet, the bottom point, are further down than he could ever be. I see space as that Shiva, as that infinity, but not just going up, down, but also as going all around. In 2024, I had a really strange experience that I'll open up about it more, I think, when I write a book about my life, when I'm more comfortable talking about it. But in that experience I had that was life-changing in a way that was simultaneously destructive and creative. It was like it ended my previous idea of who and what I am. And since then, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I experienced myself as an infinite toroid. I felt myself to be like the center point of something from which everything was birthing and dying, going out from and coming back to in every direction and every dimension. And it was a fractal because I was like a cell or a point within the greater toroid of all existence, but tuned into all existence and aware of the replication of all existence within this self, within this one me. I felt those streams of lifetimes going out and coming back. I felt everything and everyone, everywhere, all at once, moving away from me and then coming back to me. It was very, very transcendent. And that's the only thing I can think to describe it. And it happened as I was meditating in the dark on Kali, who is my Ishta Devata. I had a childhood vision of her before I knew anything about Hinduism or deities. And so I was basically asking Kali to give me another vision, like the one I'd had as a child, another experience of her. And this time, instead of like seeing her face appear in the darkness surrounded by skulls, instead, I feel like she gave me a glimpse of what it is to be her, that dark mother, that void, the cosmic womb. She is both funerary soil into which the dead are buried. And she is also the birth canal, the womb from which souls emerge. Like, to me, that's what the toroid of infinite expansion and retraction represents. It's that cosmic mother, that Kali. And the light shaft, the infinite light shaft of Lord Shiva, who is the cosmic partner, the male counterpart of Kali, is like the intelligence that pierces into it, that creates meaning of that chaos by entering that chaos. Anyway, that's what I see when I look at this drawing. The toroids within toroids, the fractals within fractals, the spiral dance of creation and constant expansion, shafts and circles, lingams and yonis, right? Like the seed and also the womb that births it and the being that is born from it, and the masculine and the feminine. It's that cosmic dance of infinity. When we can enter into that plane of reality in which time becomes infinity and space becomes omnipresent, where you can occupy everything, everywhere, all at once, the mysteries no longer seem so mysterious because you understand that all the answers are already within you. Anything that you can think to ask as a question, you can receive the answer as a channel. You know, I love listening to channeled messages. I listen to a lot of Bashar, not daily, not all the time, but every few years I'll have a little Bashar phase where I'll listen to some of Bashar's channeled messages. And likewise, I'll do the same thing with Abraham Hicks, where every few years I'll just get curious and see what Abraham has to say. And I love reading books that other people have channeled from the Arcturians. And there's a really cool book written by a Hindu author called V.T. Neelakantan called The Voice of Babaji, where he wrote down channeled messages dictated to him about the lifetimes of various saints within India that Mahavatar Babaji gave him to write. So I love reading channeled messages. And one thing that people who are skeptical will sometimes throw at a channel to try to throw them off is like, okay, if you are really channeling, solve this unsolvable mathematical formula, or tell me the meaning of this newly discovered scientific principle in a very, specific, limited field of expertise. Or say a sentence in a foreign language that you don't speak. Like, people will try to test those who enter this enlightened consciousness to prove them wrong. One thing Bashar said through Daryl Anka, who channels him, that made this make sense to me, why we can be completely tuned in and channeling and yet not access those specific answers, is that we will channel the information we yearn for, what we wish to receive. Not everyone has a yearning in this embodied lifetime to solve math equations or to speak foreign languages or to play an orchestral masterpiece, to compose music. Those who have that as their impulse, as their desire, will do it. To paint a masterpiece, or to draw a really great piece of art, or to write a work of literature that becomes something great for the whole world. A lot of times what we channel is our own higher self, our own expanded, all-encompassing self, giving something to the human mind that we can grasp to prove what we've always believed. And I think this is the main thing that Bashar was saying, that while he is tuned into the infinity of all reality, and he can see past and future as a simultaneous existence, and he can see all space and all place, wherever he wants to look, that is what he will see. Being able to express and communicate that through Daryl Anka, he has to Like he gives Daryl the messages as whole entire parcels of understanding. And then they get channeled or interpreted through the linguistic model Daryl learned, through the scientific terminology Daryl knows that he knows how to speak, and the language that he speaks. Every channeler will reveal what they channel through their personal language framework, lifestyle framework, and understanding. So there will be a little bit of a bias in anything that any human channeler tells you. And the same goes for me, the same would go for you if you channel. And yet, when you're in that state of channeling, when you're in that flow of information state, in that moment, you know everything. It's not a matter of whether or not you know it. You might look at a mathematical formula and the answer makes perfect sense for you, but you don't know how to logically, rationally explain it. So you might understand great principles of the universe, but you don't have the scientific vocabulary to describe them. That's the only thing that we're missing in the limitation of our human lifetimes. When we shift our perspective to infinity, we become infinite. We become geniuses. Yet people around us won't recognize that genius because we won't be able to put it into words that they can understand. Non-verbal meditation, when we enter that space that we experienced naturally as babies, the non-verbal space, the space that can look at a carpet and see the individual fibers as well as the field. When we can go outside and see the lawn and also every blade of grass. When we see the forest and also each tree, but not just each tree, but also each branch off of each tree and each leaf off of each branch. And also see through the ground to understand that the root system will be an equal opposite mirror image of that, but in the darkness of the dirt instead of the light of the air. Not bad or worse, but simply supportive and below. The fear of polarities and opposites will go away from us. The fear of the underground, the fear of hell, the fear of the negative, when we see that more as a support structure holding up what's above, instead of the opposite of good, to see it just as a simultaneously existing thing in and of itself, which supports the light, we can go beyond those fears. And yet, do we have the theological background to put that into a religious context to explain to people? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter whether or not anyone believes you when you have an epiphany. What matters is whether or not you trust your aha moment and deepen your perspective of reality based on that, and start living in a way that feels more harmonious and beautiful and brave and exciting to you as a result of it. For me, this is what my art unlocks. Like, this is what the process of drawing and then contemplating my own drawings, or painting and then contemplating my own paintings. That's the purpose of it all, is to get epiphanies, contemplate them, sometimes verbally, sometimes meditatively and non-verbally, and to enjoy that space. The reason I try to put it into words for videos like this is that I have that feeling that I think a lot of artists feel, where we want to share what we love about our work. I'm sure there are tons of experimental musicians out there who sit in their homes making music that they never play to anybody else, just for their own enjoyment. I do that with the piano. Sometimes I'll plug in my keyboard and zone out, making music for hours. Sometimes it sounds really good, and I kick myself over it and think like I wish I had recorded this as a voice note or as a video on my phone so I could share it and have it. But I'm not necessarily playing it for others. I'm playing it because I love to play. I draw and I paint because I love to draw and paint. But sometimes the meanings that come through those works feel like I just have to share them. I want to share them. And that's the case with this particular drawing. So I hope you loved it too. And when originally this was going to be a short, and I think you understand now why I couldn't reduce this into a 3-minute short video. By the way, I have a massive amount of admiration for people who are able to deliver knowledge parcels in a 1 to 3 minute limited time format. Like, good on you if you can take a concept like this and everything you want to say about it and reduce it down into a 3-minute parcel. It reminds me of another story I heard in India. There was a great spiritual scribe who recorded messages that came to him from his Ishtadevata. And pardon me for not remembering who specifically it was, but a Hindu saint wrote a book about his philosophy. And the book was about, we'll say 200 pages. This is me paraphrasing a story that I forget the character it's even about. But we'll say it's 200 pages. And one of his disciples says, "Wow, you wrote 200 pages. How did you do it?" And the man replies to him, "I wrote 200 pages because that's how much time I had in this lifetime." And this message takes place on the guru's deathbed, like while he's about to attain Mahasamadhi, as they call it, like the liberation beyond the form of the body. And the disciple says, "If you had had 100 years more, would the book be 1,000 pages?" And the guru laughs and says, "No. The more time I would have had to edit this down to its essence, the shorter the book would have become. If I had 1,000 more years, the book would have become 100 pages. And if I had 2,000 more years to work on it, I could have had it down to just 10 pages." And the guru described to the disciple, the purpose of knowledge transfer isn't to overwhelm somebody with how much you know. It's to take what you know and help the other to also know it. And so the best way to do that is in simple terminology, not big, confusing, multi-syllabic words. If you can teach something in the most minimalistic way possible, the least amount of words, the least complicated terminology, that is the sign of the best kind of teacher. And I think this reminds me of a comment I was just reading earlier today about Mahavatar Babaji and his lineage. And it was basically that these transcendental masters aren't so much worried about success or failure, a person being good or bad, or understanding knowledge or being confused by it and being more simple-minded. It's more about transmitting an energy, because at the end of the day, it's what we experience in a nonverbal flow state that determines the energetic level we achieve. Bashar describes this as vibrations, and he says the purpose of our life is to do what excites us the most. Follow your highest excitement. In any given moment, you have multiple options for what you can do. Like right now, I could take a shower, I could make myself breakfast, I could go for a walk, I could play the piano, I could draw a picture, or I could keep doing the voiceover for a video describing philosophically what my art means to me, why I continue to make it, and what I'm striving to express through it. What aha moment was triggered in my brain through looking at it that I want to share with others. Of all the different things I could possibly be doing right now, this is the one that's the most exciting to me. And so by nature of Bashar's philosophy, that means I am on my path, on my mission, doing what I came here to do, and only good can come of it. The same goes for you, whatever excites you most. If listening to this right now is the most exciting, Thank you very much. I take that as a great honor because it is my joy and excitement to share it. And part of that joy and excitement comes through the communion, through understanding that others are on the same wavelength as me when it comes to this kind of stuff and also get it. So, yay, that's awesome. But beyond that, after this video comes to an ending in your life, what do you do? What excites you the most? Is it making art? Is it making music? Is it scientific exploration? Is it partying and hanging out with other people and dancing? Is it being entertained or creating entertainment for others? Like, what is your excitement? What is your passion? Because I'm sure whatever that passion might be, by diving into it completely, you will also unlock your soul's greatest wisdom. And things like this will come to you. And then you'd be able to describe it, verbalize it, and pull on stories you've heard in your life, people you've met in your life, books you've met, religious principles you've encountered to illustrate it. Anyway, the note I want to leave on today is the note of music and how I feel sound and harmonics also express the same dynamic that I'm seeing in the flowering and spiraling shapes within this page. When we play the scales of music, or when I make music anyway, I always start on the piano the same way that I start on a blank page, with no pre-planned, premeditated composition in mind, just the desire to let whatever music wants to come through me. But once I start playing a tune, once my fingers hit specific keys and a specific chord sound comes out, a specific vibratory frequency is struck through the airwaves that we hear, the goal of the music is to expand that, move away from that beginning note. But ultimately, what makes it sound good to me is when the song comes back to that same beginning point after having explored other keys, other sounds, other notes, especially striking the ones that sound the most harmonious, the best, the most complementary towards each other within the context of the song timing, how long it takes to get back to it. And then kind of trying to do that in a way that follows a similar chord progression or key progression. Anyway, I feel art and music are intertwined, and the minds that paint beautiful paintings, especially abstract paintings, there will be math in it. And I think this new discovery about fractals in Jackson Pollock's art and what they're now terming not abstract expressionism, but fractal expressionism, that is just further proof that time and space are the same. Because I see music as an expression of fractal geometry in time. And I see visual art as fractal geometry expressed in space. When you listen to, I almost said abstract music, I meant classical music, but how funny is that? Non-verbal music, music without lyrics, music without words, when it's just sound. There are mathematical principles expressed within it. And they say that, kids who are naturally gifted in music will also be naturally gifted in math if they're taught properly, is how I would, that's the little annotation I would put, the little asterisk with footnote beside that. I think the way math is presented to us, I don't want to say taught, because I don't think most math teachers in schools today teach kids math. I think they dictate to kids math and want them to follow specific prescribed formulas instead of gaining an actual understanding of the numbers. But anyway, abstract art and classical music both follow very similar principles of mathematics. And this is a concept I would love to explore further. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll try to compose a piece of music to put as the background in one of my draw with me or paint with me videos where the visual on the screen is the piece of art coming into existence through the hand of the artist and the materials on the page. And then in the background, the sound is music made in the same spontaneous, creative flow state. That might be something for me to aspire to, right? But when it comes to representational music, like not like the opposite of abstract art would be, well, maybe not opposite, but the other main form of art is representational. You have abstract, non-representational, and you have representational. And in music, I think it's the lyrical stuff that is representational. It's interesting how a lot of great lyricists who are also composers, and I'm thinking of Kurt Cobain here, he said melody first, lyrics second. Like, first you come up with how you want it to sound, and then you fit words in with the right number of syllables to go with the right number of drum beats and whatever, the right sounds. Um, anyway, one of my favorite artists of all time is the singer, songwriter, musician Daniel Johns. He was the frontman of the band Silverchair. I adored him when I was a teenager. Learned about veganism first from him, and I've been vegan since 1999. A huge part of my life. But also his music has always spoken to me in a way that it's hard to describe. So one of his side projects was a collaboration with another Australian musician named Luke Steele, and they called their band Dreams, or they called their collaboration project Dreams. One of my favorite songs on the Dreams album is a song called Young Minds, and it starts with Luke, I think, singing "Memories are the wealth of the mind." And I think he goes on to say, like, time that's past can never be regained, something like that. Um, and that really made me think again of the nature of time when it comes to the human experience. We feel like once time has passed, we can never get it back, but memories are wealth because even if something is gone, never to return to us, it never leaves us if we allow ourselves to keep remembering it. And in that sense, we are connected eternally to our past, so long as we choose to remain connected to it. And I think doing little things like challenging our brains to learn new things every day and eating the right kinds of foods to stay mentally sharp to prevent dementia in our older age means that we will continue to keep that wealth of the mind in the form of our memories. But anyway, my favorite part of the song is when Daniel Johns sings, "I just want a new kind of life where we all know we are the young minds, one of a kind, you're my new religion." I could listen to those lines on repeat. And I feel what he's describing is manifestation. Not just wanting a new kind of life, but creating it and having the young mind. This is what I wanted to come back to. This is what I was going to talk about when I was going to make this a 3-minute short. I was going to describe those lyrics and how I see that in this hourless Kairos glass, this hourless glass of Kairos, where it's not counting the hours and measuring the lost time. It's more about realizing the self as a creator. You could be, you could have had 1,000 lifetimes and still have the perspective of a newborn baby if you realize 1,000 lifetimes is nothing compared to the billions of years this earth has existed. And this earth is a baby if you compare it to other cosmic bodies in space, galaxies that are older than our spiral galaxy, things that trace back to the time of the so-called Big Bang. And then what existed before the Big Bang? Before a tree, there was a seed. Well, what was there before the seed? Another tree that dropped the seed. And that's how I think of the Big Bang. Like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the universe born from the Big Bang, or the universe that created the seed that exploded into the Big Bang? I think that's why infinity is a loop, not a straight line. And anyway, I love this concept of young minds. Like the title of the song and the concept of being, we are the young minds, one of a kind. And I've heard Daniel Johns in interviews describe that he is not a theistic person. He's not a religious person, but music is his religion. And in describing that, he's described the flow state that he enters when he creates music. And he's described the awe and the wonder when, for example, there's a song he wrote as Silverchair called Across the Night. And in one of the interviews, I heard him say he didn't write that song. That song arrived for him to bring into the world, to play, to sing, to write as lyrics, but that it came from somewhere beyond. I totally understand that. I get that completely. It's basically channeling. He channeled that song. And a lot of artists and a lot of composers will say this, that the music doesn't come from them, it comes through them. And yet it's kind of the alchemy of both. It comes from you and through you when you are the creator. If music is your religion and you are a musician, that makes you God, and it makes you in tune with God. And that's kind of like we see the fractal of humanity being created in the image of God. I see that not just like God is a mother and a father, and men are created in the image of Brahma and women in the image of Saraswati, but more like God is creation, creator, and creating. And we are in that image. So we are creation. We are a product of that creation. We are the creator of what we create within the creation. And we are the act of creating, because in every moment we are creating something. Whether what we are creating is what we want or what we don't want depends on how aware of ourselves as creator manifester we are. Whether this dream is an unconscious lifetime or a lucid dream lifetime, an enlightened lifetime. So yeah, when he describes we are the young minds, one of a kind, new religion, where I take that is the concept in the Vedas that say, and again, this is me paraphrasing and not quoting a specific scripture, but basically synthesizing my takeaway of what I've heard in the Upanishads and the Shiva Sutras, what Lord Shiva revealed to Devi when they came down in a guru-disciple lifetime. That the goal of meditation is to get to a space of conscious awareness without verbalization, without the mental processes trying to calculate and quantify and verbalize what is known and experienced, to just be and to know everything. And in the Vedas, they say babies have that, but they're not enlightened because they're not aware of the fact that they have it. They aspire to learn language and to mimic the adults around them, to replicate the kids they see playing or the grown-ups they hear talking, because they want to grow up and be able to do that as a functional human. That's the purpose babies see as their goal. And yet when somebody is able to remember the nonverbal thought that took place, that awareness as a baby, they become drawn to meditation to silence that mind. Sometimes it's to overcome anxiety that comes through the verbalized process of analyzing where we think life is going. So, to get more clear, to get more lucid, sometimes it's to tune into the flow state and to receive epiphanies and greater wisdom and get into the flow of synchronicity. We have to be in a flow state to experience synchronicities, otherwise, they pass by us unnoticed. I think a lot of people ask me how I've had so many cool mystical experiences. I don't think I get them because I'm more deserving. I think I notice them because I'm more observant. I'm in that state, I'm looking for them. What you look for is what you will see. What you are is what you will attract. What you do is who you are. How you express yourself is how other people experience who you are. And so, in the Vedic culture, becoming like a little baby again, seeing and experiencing and hearing and tasting and touching and feeling reality through the senses without the judgmental input imposed on us by societal beliefs about what reality is. That gets you into the enlightened state. Being conscious and aware and beyond all categorization and quantification, where you can be in the moment and know that you are God, and know that you are everything, and know that you are one with everything, and not have any questions, because the moment a question arises, the answer completes it. Just like when you're making music, the moment a progressive chord asks a question, you can regress the keys back to the beginning point to answer it, or even further on the musical scale. If my win the lottery fantasy, there's a keyboard designer. Here's my ADHD mind going off on another tangent before I bring it back to my main point again, but there's an instrument maker who designed a keyboard that's a perfect circle, and I think he calls it the UFO. And the piano player stands in the middle of that keyboard, and there's no 88 keys where one end of the scale are the deepest notes and the other end are the highest notes. It goes back in a loop. My God, if I can ever afford one of those, I think they're thousands of dollars and each individually made. But how cool would it be to have that keyboard, that infinity loop keyboard? But anyway, when we understand that anything we wonder, we also generate and create within ourselves, because we are a fractal point of the greatest creator, which is all that is, the infinity of creation. We become our own Ishtadevata, our own individual deity. We are not looking to any external source to tell us what to think, what to believe, how to believe. We originate our own beliefs and understand them through personal experience, experiential reality, not just learned, regurgitated repetition of what other people say. And it's just so interesting to me that in the song Young Minds, he sings, "You're my new religion." And I don't feel that he's singing that to someone. I would love to talk to him one day. There's another, if I ever win the lottery fantasy. You know how some celebrities have cameos? He doesn't do that. I feel he quite rejects the concept of celebrity and is more a true artist. Like, he creates for the joy of creation and then puts it out into the world to share it with others who also appreciate what he creates because they can benefit from it. But I don't think his end goal is to be famous for the sake of fame. I think it's more to share his ideas with whoever resonates. But anyway, when he says, "You're my new religion," I feel like he's singing that into the song about the song. It's kind of a little loop within itself. That's my take on it. Like I said, I would love to ask him. But the beauty of art, whether it's lyrics and poetry, representational paintings or abstract paintings, sculpture, or an interactive installation piece, whatever it might be, the meaning of the work will be different for everyone who experiences it. I heard Dave Grohl in an interview once. Here's another tangent. He said something like he wrote a song on the newest Foo Fighters album about a window washer, and he sings in it. I forget the exact lyric, but you're smiling and you're washing your windows and you're elevated until someone lets you down. And people who heard that song commented on it, interpreted it as meaning, you're rising up until someone disappoints you, and then you come down. You're not happy. You're not smiling anymore. When Dave Grohl heard that this is what people thought his lyrics meant, he laughed and thought it's not that deep. He just meant a window washer is suspended on a rope and pulley system, washing windows high up on a building until someone lets them down, until someone pulls the pulleys back to the ground and allows them to be back free from the rope and pulley system. It wasn't meant to be a negative thing about, yeah, you're raising up until someone lets you down. It was more like you're suspended until someone lets you down in a good way. And so anyway, lyrics are open to the interpretation of the listener. Poems are open to the interpretation of the reader. Paintings and drawings are open to the interpretation of the viewer. And sometimes it's more fun not to spoil it by saying what you meant to express. And Dave Grohl had said, like, what people thought he wrote was actually cooler than what he meant to write when you start to see the different layers of possible meaning. And that's part of what some would say is the limitation of language. You can interpret a sentence or a word in multiple ways. It could have multiple meanings. And yet that's also, to me, not a limitation, but that's an expansion of language. When something has multiple meanings, I like to contemplate all the different possible meanings and take all of them simultaneously as, quote unquote, the meaning. And that's there for art too, and that's there for abstract art. So my meaning for this drawing is that infinity is infinity. There's no end point and there's no beginning point. There's only constant expansion from an origin that itself is a continuation of a previous origin or spawned from a previous origin. There is no beginning because what is always was and always will be. It's only redefining itself, representing itself, and recreating itself in order to stay in constant expansion, spiraling outward or blossoming outward, whether we're looking at the spiral on the left or the blooms on the right of this piece. The infinity loop is not just a figure eight. The figure eight is like a flatland 2D depiction of a continuously expanding and retracting toroid. That's how I see it. If you drew a figure eight and then with the same central point drew another figure eight just a half of a millimeter to the left and then kept going like that, you'd wind up with something that looks like a spiral graph image that, if flipped on its side and made 3D, would be a toroid. I see the figure eight not as the loop that is infinity, but as the most simplified, reduced down image of infinity. And then within each point along that figure eight, there could be little dots blooming outwards, little loops, little spirals. It is a fractal within a fractal within a fractal within a fractal. So thank you to the wonderful observant viewer. Like I said, I think it was Brian, but it could have been. I'm so bad when when I start these voiceovers, just like when I start my drawings, I don't plan what I want to say. I know I just want to talk about what a picture means to me. So that's why I don't come prepared with the names of people written down, ready to give props to who deserves props. But he can reply if he's watching this one too, which I'm sure he will be. He's a regular viewer if it was him who said that. But yeah, that whole contemplation on fractals in art has done two things for me. One, it's made me aware of what they are, which in a way it's kind of like from now on, when my art is fractalized, it won't necessarily be automatic, organic, and accidental, because once you become aware of what you're doing, you become a bit clumsy and awkward about it, right? Because you'll start questioning, am I doing this on purpose or is this natural? So I'm going to hopefully try to put that out of my mind and just stay in the flow state and see the fractals after the fact if they choose to emerge instead of striving to create them. Like, I wonder how Jackson Pollock would have felt if a mathematician had presented to him in his lifetime while he was doing his splatter paintings, hey, this is what you're doing. This is how it replicates the growth patterns of trees and branches. And this is how we see it in the infinity of space and constellations. Like, good job. Keep doing it. Once he's aware of what he's doing, would he have been able to keep doing it? Or would he have tried to break the pattern to do something different? Who knows? I guess we'll never know. But anyway, two things. One, it made me aware of it. But two, it spawned this whole thought process about what is time, what is space, what is infinity, and how does fractal geometry, music composition, and artistic creativity represent that in a way that our minds can witness and grasp. Anyway, back to the concept of young minds. I heard a quote in a YouTube video earlier today. There was a video about a 99-year-old artist in New York who still paints every single day. And he was showing some of his early work that were very technically precise and specific landscape images. One was a cityscape, one was a waterscape from a beach town in Cape Cod where he lived, with the lighthouse and the docks and the boats. And it was very technically precise as a representational painting. And then as he progressed in his career, things became a little bit abstracted. Not non-representational abstraction, but less precise and more expressive. And he quoted a really cool quote by Picasso. And when we hear the name Picasso, we think of cubism, right? Distorted faces, distorted bodies broken down into cubes, one eye up here, one eye down there, the nose floating somewhere, not necessarily in the middle. And Picasso had famously said, when he embarked on his artistic career, it took him 4 years to paint like an old master. I forget which old master he named, but think of the old representational masters, right? We have Botticelli, who painted the Venus. We have, this proves that my mind is always on the abstract. I can't name great masters, but Da Vinci with the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and it's all representational and specific, and Raphael, and think of the old representational painters. And so Picasso said it took him 4 years to be able to paint realistically with technical precision as well as they did. And then it took him his entire lifetime to be able to paint like a child again. And his goal was to paint like a child, where things come through intuitively, spontaneously, without overthinking, without trying to be anything, for the joy of expressing what the artist wishes to depict. And that is it in a nutshell. You meditate to have the mind of a baby. The great artists whose names we know in our era have overcome and grown beyond the necessity to be technically specific and precise, because we can take photographs. Like, everyone with a smartphone can take a picture of anything at any time, and it will be photorealistic because it will be a photo. We don't need artists to replicate the known world anymore. And so to become like children again, where we create through the spontaneous flow state joy of creation. And then that spontaneous, joyful flow state is forever available to any viewer who sees the piece. To me, that's what it's all about. And with music, and by great musicians too. Make a composition that might sound simple, but it's the simple tunes that we remember the best. They get stuck in our heads. And if there's flow state, beauty, and something aspirational that the artist who composed the music or wrote the lyrics was seeking to express, that will be available to us in that beautiful, simple form of that tune. Young minds are the only minds that can create a new religion. And that's why Jesus said, you can only enter into the gates of heaven if you become like a little child. And that's why the Vedas say, unlearn what you've learned. Bring your mind back to the awareness, consciousness, and bliss, the Sat Chit Ananda. Sat, existence. Chit, consciousness. Bliss, Ananda. Bring yourself back to that which you had when you were a baby. And even before that, in your pre-embodied cosmic conscious presence, bring that into this lifetime, and you become a master, an enlightened being, someone having a lucid dream in a world full of sleepers who don't know they're dreaming. Anyway, you can see why I didn't make this a 3-minute short. Maybe sometime in the future, I will have learned the great alchemy of synthesizing philosophical meandering thoughts down into sound bites. But for now, I guess I'm more of a podcaster format video maker. But I do hope you enjoyed this. I hope you took something out of it. I'm sorry I didn't record this as a draw with me video where I drew and filmed every step of the drawing, but sometimes when I draw and paint, I don't want to bother with setting up a tripod and staying stationary on a tabletop. Sometimes I like to lift up the paper close to my face to do the little details and shift around and carry it with me and draw outside. That's how this one took form. So sometimes I'll film the process of drawing, but other times I'll just draw and then share the product. Hopefully it doesn't take away from the final video. But anyway, let me know how you feel about all this, and if you've ever made something or entered into a flow state during your process of creation and had an epiphany or a realization in which in that moment you felt like a channel, like you were tuning in to a greater reality beyond what any people have ever taught you in any textbook or any so-called lesson about life, and how that felt to you. Do you remember being a little child, having a young mind, and the excitement of exploration of the world around you at that point in time when you felt like you didn't already know everything? And are you able to get back to that? Do you feel that you have a young mind? And how do you interact with the concept of creation as religion? You know, when you create something, do you feel like a fractal representation of the ultimate beyond the cosmos creator? There's a lot that we can talk about from this video. I guess what I'm trying to say is, please leave a comment, like and subscribe, hype it if that's still there as an option on YouTube. Every bit of interaction that you give helps me as a small YouTuber get more noticed by the algorithm. And if you feel that you enjoyed listening to this video and looking at that drawing, you know, maybe somebody else out there would too, and they'll only be able to see it if the algorithm lets them. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe. It helps. It really does help me. I appreciate it. And that helps me stay inspired to keep making videos like this. And I do trust that whoever is meant to see it and hear it will come to it. So thank you for being a part of that process. So much love to you. I can't wait to hear about what you're creating, whether it's musical, artistic, scientific, linguistic, or whatever. And yeah, we'll catch up in the comments section. Bye for now.